And here we go. Now that the recording is in progress, my computer tells me, I'm happy to welcome you to a session in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, not just any session. It's special on a couple of counts. But before we go there, as everybody is shuffling into the room, I want to introduce myself, and I'm Jay Frost. I'm the host of the Philanthropy Mastermind series brought to you by DonorSearch. And today, this program is actually a co-production, I guess you could say, between DonorSearch and the firm where the two guests that I'll be speaking with are co-presidents, and that's Campbell and Company. If you don't know about Campbell and Company, I know you'll learn a lot more about it probably in the course of this conversation, and you'll find out where you can take a look at their website, learn all about their practice. We won't be talking much about DonorSearch, however, because that's not our usual style, but rather you'll find that there's a lot of information on the company along with everything that we do in the Mastermind series, which they have been generously allowing us to produce since 2016 with over 500 programs. All of that content's over under the resources tab. And if you go over there and check that out, maybe get this recording, share it with colleagues who can't be here live, and I hope you'll do that, you'll find not only all the past recordings, webcasts, podcasts, etc., but you may be able to learn something about your donors. And so it's kind of a nice bonus, and I hope you'll check them out. They really do believe in what we do. Also, we do want to hear from you, but we won't be able to do that live because you probably know this is a webinar. That's why we can't see your face and we can't hear your voice, but we do want you to be a part of this. So there are two ways you can do that. The first is at the bottom of your screen typically, and that's in the chat. So if you would please just open up the chat and say hello, and yes, we already have somebody doing that right now. So hello, Frank. But everybody else just jump in there if you would. And sometimes I see a little offer or two within the chat. Just ignore that. That's a place for a conversation, not marketing. However, we do have over on the other side a Q&A. So Q&A is really the repository for questions. We're going to have a conversation first, and then we'd love to open this up for a conversation with you. So please do utilize the chat for a conversation amongst yourselves. That's a lot of fun. And then the Q&A for questions that you have for our guest today. And so with that, I want to jump right in and welcome, of course, Julia McGuire and Kate Roosevelt. You can see them both right there, the co-presidents of Campbell and Company. Thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jay. It's a treat to be here with you.
It's really great to have you. And we're also doing this remotely because you're in two different locations entirely. It's a big firm, and you're also in different places doing different things all the time. So where are each of you today?
Julia?
I am in the Chicago area in the Midwest.
Okay. And Kate?
And I'm in Seattle, joining you from the great city of Seattle, Washington, where I've lived for over 30 years now.
Great. Okay. Well, aside from the time difference, it just shows that we can do meetings like this and they still work. But that's no surprise for the two of you because you've been working in real life and virtually for a while now, haven't you? So maybe we can begin with that. And perhaps we can just do it in alphabetical order. Usually I'd read some bio, but you're right here. So Julia, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in this partnership running this firm?
Terrific. Thank you so much. My name is Julia McGuire. I've been in fundraising for more than 30 years, starting at the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International in Evanston, Illinois. I've been with Loyola University Chicago, Loyola University Medical Center, Ronald McDonald House Charities Global, and Boys and Girls Clubs of America. I've been with Campbell and Company for 22 years. I spent 5 in Chicago and then 10 and a half in San Jose, the San Francisco Bay Area. So I know about remote working before it became the thing to do, and then came back to Chicago 7 years ago and continued the work with Campbell and Company in different positions, the most recent as co-president with Kate. In my downtime, I am on the board of the Leadership Council at the Baumhart Center at Loyola University Chicago, and just most recently joined the board of the Pickles Group, which is an organization that supports children whose parents are going through active cancer treatment. My daughter joined last year, and we're very proud to be able to serve them now on the board. So very excited about that. And any additional time I have goes to being a hockey mom. So.
A hockey mom.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, we can dig into that later. That sounds
another time, whole other webinar.
Fun and scary.
Yeah.
So Kate, how about yourself?
Oh, thank you, Jay. And I, of course, am in the hometown of the Seattle Kraken, the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Reign, and my beloved Seattle Mariners. So there you have it. Jay, again, thank you to you and DonorSearch for inviting us to spend time with you today. When I think about my fundraising career, I honestly think that it began as a kid when I, along with collecting candy on Halloween, I had my trusty UNICEF box with me and collected.
For UNICEF. Sure.
Exactly. And, at a very young age, it just became clear to me that there was a reason and a need and an opportunity to raise money for people to support, thriving lives for people other than myself. Right. I grew up in a household that was very steeped in the nonprofit sector. My dad was a executive of a environmental group for a number of years. My mom was a longtime volunteer and board member for our local Planned Parenthood affiliate. And when I got into graduate school, I decided that I really wanted to study how nonprofit organizations function and what role philanthropy and giving play in activating the social sector. So my actual hands-on fundraising work started at the University of Washington, where I worked for a number of years, morphed into the environmental sector, and then kind of stumbled into consulting. And for a number of years, this was back, 23 years ago, helped to run and build a firm in Seattle that eventually was acquired by Campbell and Company in 2013. And it was at that point that Julia and I started our wonderful journey together as executive vice presidents and moved into the co-presidency role just last fall. So here we are.
Wow. So a co-presidency is also somewhat unusual, but then Campbell and Company isn't just any firm. You guys have been around for a long time. Can you give us a window on the firm for those who don't know it? And also maybe something about the nature of that, because I understand that it stems from the nature of the ownership of the firm and how you all work together as a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So Campbell and Company has been in business since 1976. We, from a very early age, formed an employee stock ownership program as a part of our company. And so every person who's a part of the Campbell and Company team is what we refer to as an employee owner. And that mindset of employee ownership is really woven through our DNA, how we think about our work together and with our clients, and the value that we're trying to build in the world and the impact that we're trying to make. Over the years, we've grown into what we now refer to really as a full service fundraising consulting firm. And to even think more broadly, we're really about advancing nonprofit organizations through fundraising, communications, data analytics, what we refer to as strategic information systems, and executive search. So we want to make sure that there are great leaders leading nonprofit organizations, that they have access to and know how to use data to make good decisions and allocate their resources appropriately, that they have killer abilities to tell a story that is going to engage a broad audience and inspire people to share their time and talent and treasure with that nonprofit organization, and that they've got really excellent cutting edge and also time-worn practices for engaging people and inviting their partnership, empowering their mission. So that's just, I think a thumbnail sketch of us, and our mission is to collaborate and innovate with people who change lives through philanthropic vision and action. So that's us.
And Julia, you're in Chicago, and I have to admit that it's just the nature of my travel, I guess. I always thought of Campbell as being a firm in Chicago. I mean, I know that people are everywhere, but is that headquarters? And if so, how do you navigate that, especially with the co-presidency and then working with people all over the place?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jay. So we were Campbell and Company originally was founded in Chicago, and that was the headquarters of Campbell and Company for a very long time. It is still a core center for us, with a significant amount of our staff not necessarily in the office these days, given the hybrid approach that most of us have to work, but the center of the largest cluster of employees. But when we were able to partner with Collins Group in 2013 and come together, that gave us a significance and really important presence in Seattle. So that is another office and a center that we have that has a significant cohort of folks. In addition to that, we're in California, we're in Washington, D.C., Virginia, We have folks in Ohio, Missouri, Maine, and Massachusetts, just to name a few. I know I'm probably Texas and Florida.
Texas, yeah.
Yeah. So we have people across the country doing this work. And so it actually made sense when we thought of the co-presidency not to have someone rooted in just one geographic location, but to have someone who could be a decision maker and a leader and a resource to the people in our firm in different time zones and in different geographic locations to make the heavy mantle of being the stewards of this ESOP company for now, to share that mantle geographically, ideologically, with other things is very important.
And I can imagine that it does help, especially in times like these that we've been living through for the past 2.5, 3 years, to be able to think broadly like that it's not just a matter of, well, we have people working in other places, so we have to listen to them. This is it's a chance to work with people wherever they are, your clients in the sector as a whole, not even just the employees. So that also must mean that you are drawing your inspiration for what you focus on from a lot of different places, the issues that are of importance to you. And I know we're going to talk about the future. That's the purpose of, or at least the way we advertise this session. So we're going to do that, but maybe it would be helpful to talk about the present for a second. What are some of the issues that you've been working on as a firm, and how did you decide, no, those are the things we want to focus on? So there are areas of practice, like you described them, Kate, but there's also just the things that you think are particularly important right now that I'm sure inform those areas of practice. How did you decide on those things, and what have been most important to you in the last couple of years or so?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. And, Julia and I have the benefit of working with a really stellar board of directors, as well as a leadership council of people within our firm, and really opening ourselves up to ideas, questions, and suggestions from people throughout our firm. So we have a very open kind of leadership, I think, style in our firm, and that really helps us to be the best that we can and to be thinking 3, 6, 9, 12 months ahead. So we were talking earlier about the role of AI, for example, in fundraising, right? And literally last week, one of our leadership council colleagues sent a message on Teams to us saying, we need to get together and talk about AI. And then another colleague responded and said, I'm involved with an AI working group that started thinking about AI from the perspective of predictive modeling. We're now broadening the conversation. So we really rely a lot on our people that are in the field to bring ideas and thoughts about what we should be paying attention to and how we should be adapting and morphing, our services. I think our journey around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is another really good example of that. That came up through our team and team members asking us, how are we thinking about these issues, both as it relates to our team, but also how we can bring those values and practices into our consulting engagements. So there's a lot of flow, shall we say, that is constantly happening at Campbell and Company. And our job, I think Julie and I see, is really just to create the openings for those conversations to happen. And I think just thinking about your question as a firm, and I think this will not surprise anyone who's listening in today, because I think this is top of mind for all of us. We have to be relentlessly focused on our people, meaning ensuring that we have great talent on our team, that people see and feel that Campbell and Company is a place where they belong and can do their best work. And that we have great programs in place for people to see how their careers can progress with us, how they can build their own equity through the employee stock ownership program, and become leaders in whatever ways that means to them in their life, right? So we are just relentlessly focused on our people all the time. And I think in addition to that, always also thinking about how we can adapt and evolve our services to meet the needs of the sector, because at the end of the day, that's why we exist. Julie, what would you add? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say, and those needs have probably evolved a lot, especially in the last couple of years. So Julia, do you have any thoughts on maybe what's present of mind today, and before we talk about the future?
for a transition in the future. So at least for our work with our clients, learning how to connect and continue to have that personal connection through digital and technology aspects. How are we using those? We are at our firm going through an entire analysis of one of the things that we do really well is work as teams together across these service lines to bring everything to our clients and to be able to bring younger people into the firm and get the experience and have the opportunity to learn and grow. So we're really focused on training talent, continuous learning programs, DEIA being a part of that now as we want to continue to grow and learn. DEIA is much bigger than that, but that is a part of that program in addition to the services we offer. Also talking about, making sure, Kate talked about our people and their career paths. We're making sure that we're looking at our compensation and how are people feeling that value and that ability to live their lives. How can technology help us with work-life integration? We know there's no such thing as balance in this industry, if in any industry, but how do we use technology to be able to do our jobs well and also be able to take that time for ourselves as well? So that's a real focus, and particularly as the younger generation comes and joins us in the workforce, they are bringing amazing ideas, both on how to serve our clients, but also how to work. And we're really excited about that energy and those ideas coming to us.
Just, if you don't mind, could you lean into that for a moment about what it means to come to work? Can you talk about what that means? I mean, as you understand it, maybe as some of the people you're recruiting in the future understand it, because this is kind of an important discussion right now.
Right. And so what does it mean to connect with your teammates when we're seeing only the upper portions of ourselves most of these days? So, at our firm, we believe coming to work, we have a document that we use for all of our staff that was designed by our staff about how do we work together. We have a document that talks about working preferences and styles. We think it's very important. We are not asking people to come in and be Campbell and Company. We're asking people to come in and help form Campbell and Company. And so coming to work today doesn't mean coming in and following a rote path or written instructions that tell you how to behave at work. It's about dressing for your day. It's about making sure you're there for your teammates and for your clients and for yourself. And you can't serve others from an empty vessel. So if we're not bringing our best selves to work, then how can we bring our best selves to our clients? And so we really are trying to think of how to manage those items. We do try to connect. I'll just talk about from the technology and being spread across the country. We have things like water coolers that are done both on a chat. So today's water cooler topic was, what was your favorite TV show from the last year or your favorite musical performance? We have a pet channel so we can share our pets. We have a parent channel so we can talk about the parent foibles that we are all experiencing these days. And I think that connection is how we can bring ourselves to work for our teammates, and then that's how we get to do our work for our clients.
This begs another question, and we didn't prepare for this, so if you don't want to talk about this, it's okay. But when you all began in your careers, was it like that? I mean, Kate, it was where there's no guidelines about what to dress and what, that you're a part of the company or you were yourself and you were, sort of loaning yourself to the company. Yes. I mean, all these things that Julia was just talking about. What was it like for you when you started?
Yeah, well, I'll just say this, that when I started at the University of Washington, that's when I got my first email address. Okay. So, I mean, hello, people on this webinar podcast, there was a time when we did not even have email, and now I've got every possible communication tool that I could ever want right here, right? So it's just remarkable. But Jay, it is the workforce and the way of working in our world, and I know this isn't true of everyone, and certainly not true across the universe of industries and sectors, but when you're in a professional services firm, I think that the ideas of really a people first culture and flexibility have to be at the core of who you are and how you think about your work. And so, back in my early days, very prescribed work hours. And, I had a computer that stayed on my desk at the end of the day. I did not bring it home with me. I did not have an iPad or a tablet. I certainly didn't have, I think I might have had a cell phone, but it was a big thing that I had to lug around with me. So when I just think about where we are right now, and just to state the obvious, because people who are much smarter than I am have written and talked extensively about this, there's so much more flexibility in the way that we walk through the day. And I personally have concerns that sometimes that creates a sense that you're always available
100%.
and always on.
Right.
And how, to Julia's point, how do we make sure that we're not empty vessels, right? So for me, what that means is that I try to get out every day for a long walk. And I'm very fortunate to be able to spend time out on the Olympic Peninsula. So more often than not, I'm walking in the woods with my dog, just
Oh, wow.
doing nothing, right?
Sounds
And
beautiful.
turning off my brain.
Sure.
But I also know that, there are folks that are like spreading their work over 16 to 20 hours in a day. So they're feeling like they're just busy all the time, right?
Mhm.
So I do think, this nature of working and the way of working is evolving. And we're about to launch an internal discussion in our firm that we're calling the future of work, because we have to figure out what we're going to do with our 2 offices. We have to figure out how to support a workforce that is now almost majority remote or partially remote. And, our colleagues in California and Boston and DC are helping us to, find the way forward here, because they've always worked this way. And we have to figure out how to engage effectively with our clients who need us, right? And who are hiring us to do very specific activities with them. And I think so for us, like, one of the things that was great to discover in the early days of the pandemic was we were ready to work remotely. We really were. And sure, there were learnings and bumps and all of that sort of stuff, but it was not a huge transition for us from the perspective of engaging with our clients and doing really productive work together for us to make that transition. I think some of our clients had a harder time than we did, honestly.
I was going to ask you about that, because on the one hand, you're talking a lot right now, because I asked about the internal part of this, but the whole reason why your business is there, the Campbell is there, that you do this work, is to work with all these others. And so, and one of you alluded to it, that breakdown of work and life, that wall that, if it was ever there, is totally gone now. That's especially true in the nonprofit world, where the people who are here with us today, many of them are probably getting email at 11 o'clock at night, or 1 in the morning, or 6 in the morning. And so you're, as a firm, you're probably getting those pressures from clients who have those expectations that work is 24 hours, but you also, in recruitment for positions, for helping them to figure out how to wage a campaign, all the things that people do. I wonder if you're able to take some of those internal processes and policies and philosophies and help nonprofits to also live that better work life.
Yeah. Julia, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly our hope. And as we do things internally, and for our firm, that when we're asked to come in and do a development assessment, look at development office practices, we're a service organization. It's people, relationships, and that's exactly what fundraising is as well. And I think I often tell, when we're stuck with a problem, I said, what would we tell our clients to do in this moment, right? And that, as we hear about people, and it's very difficult to hire staff right now, not that it's ever been simple, but right now, as Kate said, it's that flexibility, it's meeting people where they are, it's setting clear expectations, allowing people to set them with you so that they are owning their own goals, they're owning where they want to be, and that they do see a path forward within an organization. So we're able to help our clients from that perspective as they're hiring people. How do you think about their role? How do you encourage them to do their role? In terms of talking with volunteers, one of the things that we have really found is even when we are available to be in person these days, so often our boards, our client boards, are finding it much easier at 7 p.m. at night to be calling in on Zoom. So it's very interesting. A client in the San Francisco Bay Area said their board really wanted to meet in person. They decided to meet in person, and 3 people showed up in person. And so this reality now that we must always be prepared, whether we're in this triple-demic moment where there's all these viruses around, or commutes, or we haven't unwound our calendars yet to build in time for transitions, and the ability to get to another physical location. All of those reasons, we're going to be always have meetings where someone, I think, will be attending virtually, and how important that is to be able to do. And we've been raising money this entire time as well. So
Right.
Our clients have, and some of those, I mean, one of my clients had the biggest ask they've ever made, and it was done over Zoom. And it was a $2 million ask and gift that was received for an organization that had never received a 7-figure gift. Nothing is going to replace being across the table from someone. I'm not suggesting that, just like AI isn't going to ever replace the ability to have a conversation and flow and look someone in the eye. But those are some important places that we're able to bring what we've learned internally about work out to help. So.
And by the way, we're getting a lot of Me Too's from the audience.
Yes.
And so we're paying attention to you out there. I appreciate your saying that. This is an experience that you're hearing from a lot of the people that you work with, that you talk with in the sector, which is exactly why it's helpful to talk about this before we talk about what's next, because what's next can go, I guess, in any number of directions, but particularly 2 big paths, right? One is, well, okay, we've been there, we've done that. Now let's just go back to whatever it was that we thought was normal. And then the other is, well, maybe we learn something from our collective experience, and then we do things differently. So, and when we were talking about this in advance, we talked about several issues, but one of them is the economy, and maybe the economy informs a lot of that. And by that I mean anything from recession, potential recession, impact on assets if the stock market has a correction, for example, or if the real estate market changes in some significant way. Certainly we've seen that with Bitcoin, right? Everybody has talked about crypto, some with pleasure, some with not a lot of admiration. But with crypto, we've seen a big fall in Bitcoin. So a lot of things have happened as we're coming into the new year and looking ahead by year, 2 or 3 years, because campaigns and projects are longer than 6 months or a year. What are you imagining that we have to be prepared for on the economic front, and how are you advising clients on that?
Yeah, great. Happy to turn the page here and look ahead. So there are a couple of things, Jay, that we are talking about and thinking about and keeping present in our minds at this moment in time. And today's the little updates that I'm getting on my phone about what's happening in the markets is, just more of the same, I think, in terms of uncertainty and volatility. And here's what I would say. First of all, what we know, and you look at the Giving USA research, that has been conducted for 40 plus years, we know that giving continues during periods of economic volatility and through recessionary periods, right? At the same time, some of the things that we're seeing and experiencing right now in terms of the relationship between, rising inflation and low unemployment, these are factors that it's like they've never really been at play in combination before in this way, shape, or form. And I am not going to pretend to be an economist, but I will tell you that number one, what we're thinking about is how do we continue to be in relationship and in conversation with people who undoubtedly are going to be feeling some sense of unease and uncertainty about their own financial status, whether they're invested in the markets and making gifts from assets, or they are not, and they are making gifts from their discretionary income, what we would refer to as the checkbook gifts. We have to assume, I think, that for at least the next 12 months, that people are going to be thinking about their giving from a place of a certain level of anxiety, uncertainty, and unease. That is not to say that they don't want to participate in giving. and they do not want to continue to support the organizations that they feel are doing meaningful work for their friends and neighbors and even for themselves in the world, right? So staying connected with people is more important than ever before. We also, particularly in the campaign work that we're doing, are talking with clients that are in the early stages of planning campaigns that may launch next year, that when we think about how they are projecting cash flow and pledges tied to things like building projects and endowment growth, that they should assume that a certain number of the people that they're going to be talking with are going to be reluctant to make multi-year pledges. And multi-year pledges, as you know, that's like the holy grail of campaign and major gift fundraising, right? So again, it's not that they don't want to give, it's that they may not want to give in the way that you want them to give. So instead of having the one gift conversation about making a 5-year pledge, the team needs to be prepared to be in an ongoing conversation with their supporters and partners, checking in with them regularly, asking lots of questions, and asking them how they want to engage and when. And it sounds very simple, but it requires a different level of effort and work, and sort of a continuity to it that when we're living in good times and we're out raising multi-millions for great projects and missions, again, the one and done conversation about multi-year pledge, it's just, we have to be thinking different about that this year. So
Wow.
Julia, what? Yeah,
I was going to ask Julia on that front, if you're and please add in general, but I was going to ask you, when you have that conversation with clients and prospective clients, it must seem, to some of them they might think it's simple, as you just said, Kate, but others might say, wow, it sounds exhausting. I have to go back in there and talk to them every single year, or every 3 months, or every month. How am I going to do that? I have all these other people I have to see. I have to raise all this money. So the focus is on what they don't have versus what they have. How do you help people to understand that they need to have those conversations? They need to be dynamic with supporters.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the one trend we already commented on is some of these conversations are now happening virtually. So in the future trends, we have to be prepared to have these multiple conversations virtually or in person, as the donor prefers. And then, the bottom line is we need to be in contact with our donors regardless. So had they made a multi-year pledge, in order to ensure that they're still engaged, interested, we'd have to steward that gift and report back. This is really just shifting stewardship and saying, you've made your first gift, we're going to come back and report how that's doing and ask you to continue to support the campaign. So in some ways, I think it can deepen a relationship. I like to look at the positive outcome. The trend is that can deepen the relationship because you're coming back, and instead of forgetting to steward people, you have to come back and have those conversations in order to get the next conversation about an additional gift that might have been just part of an earlier pledge. You also have the opportunity to encourage people to give more. Their time, their circumstance may have changed. So when people are hesitant to give in this moment in time with the economy, the one thing we do know about these cycles is that they are cycles and that we will come out of it. We don't know what it will look like. I'm neither an economist, as Kate said, nor a prognosticator, except that history has shown us we will come out of this. And in that next meeting, that individuals may be able to give additional funds at that time. And that's the other thing that I think is really important here is no matter what's happening in the economy or in someone's life, to have those conversations, because we should not presume to know where someone is or what their expectation is. And too many times I've heard people say, well, it's a rough time for them, so I'm going to not talk to them. And again, it's a great time to share your story, to keep people engaged without the handout. And we don't know what their whole story is. Maybe this is a time they want to get more involved. Maybe they are able to continue to give. And so I think listening to donors, being sensitive and listening to donors, but making sure we are talking to donors. And that's the good news about shorter pledges, is that we must do so instead of letting it fall.
Research is a piece of this, I'm sure, but I don't know how much, especially for the kinds of projects that you work on, which can be pretty significant. How big a part is research in all this? I mean, whether it's sitting down with someone for the first time or keeping abreast of what their their opportunities and challenges are.
It's a huge part of it. And what we find, and this, earlier when we were talking about how our services and approach has grown over time, the interest in and the imperative to have access to data in order to use your limited resources to best effect it's just essential now. It's not a nice to have, it's a must to have. And every fundraising shop should have, I would hope, some basic tools at a minimum for doing wealth screening and doing other research online to really get a sense of who. Again, it's really about where you can and should be spending your time, and also not forgetting about and attending to the broad base of donors that know and love you. And in the aggregate, smaller gifts make a huge difference. So research is, I think, more important than ever. And we're lucky that the tools that are available to us and the technologies are so much more advanced than they were when I started fundraising, 25 years ago, when literally there were still people that had donor records information on 3x5 cards, right? So we've come a long way. And I think it's really not about, having all of the tools. It's about having a few tools that you can use to best effect in your shop. And information is power is the bottom line.
What about the staffing then to support those tools? I know that consultancies like Campbell and Company can provide some of that, but you have a lot of clients. You're not necessarily providing a researcher to go along with the tools. Is it important for organizations to build that internal capacity, both human and technical, in order to do this work?
It's so important, Jay. Thank you for bringing that up. And I will, just say that I think our industry and the nonprofit fundraising and communications industry still suffers from being under-resourced. There's just no way around it. We're not making the case well enough, or if we are, people aren't listening to the importance of investing in these kinds of roles and capacities so that we can raise more money to really move our mission forward is the bottom line, right? And it's up to all of us to make that case. And I think, there are tools that are fairly easy to use that don't require additional staff positions. There are ways to outsource, et cetera. But I think in general, investing in some kind of a basic research function is really mission critical at this point.
Now, I know there are a number of other issues we talk about tackling, and one of them is tech, which is a good transition for that. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that if there's anybody out there who has a question, we have a couple that are parked here in the Q&A. I'm definitely going to get to those. But if you have other ones or comments that you want us to address, please put them in there. I want to make sure that your needs and interests are addressed here. So we're just digging beneath the surface of a practice that does a lot of work. And these two guests have a lot that they can contribute. So please do post in the Q&A for anything you'd like to hear them talk about, or you'd like us to discuss generally. But before we go there, I just want to touch on tech, because we've kind of sideswiped it a couple times. One was with reference to research, another one was reference to screening, another one was reference to AI. And of course, we've talked about what we're doing right now and how much that has changed over the last few years. $2 million asks in a Zoom call is not something most organizations would have done 5 years ago, but now I'm hearing about it all the time. Clearly, it's working for some of your clients. I've seen it work. So when you look forward at tech, what are the things that you're looking at that are real versus kind of ephemera, that are just the cool kids things that actually aren't going to make a difference in the way we do our work? What is it that people need to invest in?
So I think, one of the reasons we talked about the younger generation in terms of staffing is because of the fact that we need people who can come in and use the tech, right? And use the tech wisely, and all of it in service to the relationship building and to the fundraising. So we have the standard tenets of fundraising, which are the relationship building, the broad-based fundraising. It may be moving up, having people invest more deeply and to make larger gifts, and in philanthropic investments to move people from that initial perhaps charitable gift to a transformational philanthropic gift. The tech can be used. Someone asked in the chat about direct mail. Is it ineffective and antiquated? I think there are still people that look for that tactile direct mail. They're looking for that piece in there, but in and of itself, it is not enough. What it has to happen with tech is people are expecting more personalized. So you can use the tech to make sure if you're sending a letter to dear friends, that sort of direct mail is not going to be effective. If you can do a very personalized, thank you for your gift that you made in April of X, here's what's happened and here's what we'd like you to do. And if you're timing that, as I just did with a client this morning, with a video that's going to drop through their email or or through a text at the same time, then you're having multi-channel messaging that's coming in. And so the tech can be used for that personalization, taking that data to be able to not just mail to people and ask them if they, to make a gift this year without acknowledging that they've already done so. So we're able to acknowledge what they've already done for the organization, really target our asks in a personalized way for them, and use it in a multi-channel way with all forms of direct mail, direct marketing, when we call it, because it's mail, it's email, it's text. It can be social media that people may not give through, but that's an educational piece. And then we should be picking up the phone, potentially doing Zoom, and trying to meet personally, depending on what level of interest the individual has.
And Kate, if I can follow up with you on that, just blending a couple things that people are trying to place in both the Q&A and in the chat. We are monitoring, we just can't monitor it all simultaneously. And that is how these things might be informing what we do with what are probably ungraciously termed mid-level donors, but I think we've all done that. So all these people that we're watching almost winnow out of the US philanthropic economy, are some of these things that we're talking about ways to give them a little more attention, engagement, and bring them in and invite them to give?
Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, Jay, I think I know everybody who's with us today is well aware that we are in the middle of a generosity crisis. We are seeing the number of households in the United States continue to decline. And I want to say, in terms of looking at 2023 and what happened this year with Giving Tuesday, it gives me hope, right? I mean, Giving Tuesday generated over $3 billion in donations from what we would refer to as everyday donors. These are folks that are getting lots of appeals from organizations that they're engaged with, smaller gifts, giving online. And the response rate this year was really remarkable. I mean, the results have gone up 25% since 2020. And the number of households participating in Giving Tuesday went up over 6% this year. So I think that when we think about how to engage the middle of the hourglass, if you will, and we also think about how to stay connected with people who are making very meaningful gifts at smaller levels, digital tools, essential, being in regular communication with people. And as Julia said, the opportunities and the tools that we have now to personalize communications, appeals, and solicitations are just so critically important, And I do think too, we've seen a lot of people using Zoom and other virtual gathering tools as a great way to be in relationship with a larger number of people. And it's a great way to give people meaningful content, mission-related content. So if you're an aquarium that is on the cutting edge of conservation practices, and you can run a Zoom webinar or a session for your donors on how that's happening and why aquariums have moved into this direction, and give people just a great way to understand the inner workings of aquaria, fantastic, right? So there are a lot more tools that are at our disposal now, and they are great ways to connect with people across the spectrum is the bottom line.
And I know that one of those tool sets that people talk about is AI. And I don't know if you want to talk about that or not, but where we're seeing it right now in the conversation ranges from something we talked about before we began today, which is something like the AI chat device that is open and available through OpenAI. To many people. If you're curious what this is, you can look many places, but one is on my LinkedIn feed. And people can go in there and use that to write content, whether it's for social posts or to try and write donor communications, which, for example, Gravity, I think, did some testing with in the past, and Cherry and Koshi has been the series has done, all the way through to what DonorSearch AI is doing with looking at entire files and looking for opportunities there and trying to focus around those opportunities. So AI is being used in lots of different ways, but it's also, there's a lot of fear factor with AI. So where do you fall with that in respect to AI as you're looking forward? Are you advising people to look into it, and if so, in which ways?
Yeah, I would say that we're cautiously interested in it. And what I mean by that, and again, I'm very good at admitting what I don't know, and I am not an AI expert. I'm also very grateful that there are people in our firm that are involved in these working groups looking at and answering these kinds of questions, Jay. And I think, to reference something that Julia said earlier, these tools, as I think about them, are meant to support the relationships that are primarily built and maintained by human beings. Okay. So I think, I just personally can't imagine a world in which AI would replace the human relationship, but can it be used to add that extra level of, again, communication content? We're paying attention to you. We see you. We want to hear from you. Great. And I think that, our sector, like many other sectors across the US economy, need to have an experimental mindset when it comes to seeing how we can apply these tools to advance our profession, to do the work more effectively, and ultimately to potentially just bring more attention to the importance of relationship. This is a potential tool that can help us to enhance relationships. How? I'm not quite sure yet.
But when you say experimental relationship, Julia, if you want to tackle that, what does that mean in terms of an organization? Should they actually budget some time and some dollars to experiment with different tools and staff time to see what they can do, even if it risks failure, or maybe sometimes intentionally to create failure?
We're too afraid of failure in the not-for-profit world, and that is because we're under-resourced, right? And someone in the Q&A said that their executive director CEO does not make advancement a priority. And I bet that's both financially and out of time, right? And that investment. But I think if you think of AI as Kate said, a tool that humans can use, when you're talking about the younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, they're going to give to places that they're engaged in. They're not going to give to places that are far away. But what's interesting about AI, what's interesting about technology is that we're bringing places far away closer to us. So I've seen a couple of questions from people in other countries. It used to be 20 years ago, I remember we'd spend all year planning for someone to go to another country to see a school that they'd invested in the sub-Saharan, or to go over to see a church perhaps they'd rebuilt in Europe, or perhaps to go see work that they were doing in the Far East. Today, we can have those every month. We can have the people on the ground bringing us in, having that engagement that the younger generation that every generation wants to have, but the younger generation, if you're looking to get them engaged and involved, and that's how they're going to give. They are not going to give without that engagement and involvement. And so AI can help with that by sending out messages that are tailored to folks, that tell them what's going on, how they can get engaged, how they can become involved. And it starts that. And then when someone responds to that, then we can put a human into that place. So
right.
if one could get that investment, perhaps one could get a donor to underwrite that as an experiential lesson, and that we can take that risk and be willing to fail. That is really how we're going to be able to move our organizations and our relationships with our donors forward, in my opinion.
Right. Well, we don't have to look back very far to know that when people were testing email not so long ago, there were a lot of naysayers, but we had to make an investment to find if it would work. And now we can't do without that as a fundraising tool, obviously, or anything. Just one last item that I know was on our agenda, and then there were a few questions that I don't think we managed to touch on at all yet. So I want to see if we can, and that has to do with something else we've kind of dabbled in, and that is talking about this in terms of maybe cohorts. We've talked about generational differences a little bit, and you've made reference to DEI. That has been a huge, huge conversation, as it always should have been, but it's been particularly hot as a conversation the last year or two. So first of all, I want to know if you think that it's going to continue to be, and if it is, and I'm not taking a position. I'm just curious about your thoughts. And then if it is, how we can ensure that we're doing something about those things that we tend to talk about but not really act on.
Yeah. Jay, thank you for taking us into this essential conversation about how DEI intersects with our work and really is becoming, I think, embedded in everything that we do all the time. And here are a couple things that I will put out as things to think about in the new year. The first of which is that thanks to an amazing group of individuals in Seattle, Washington, and now across the world, we have a movement that is building called community-centric fundraising. It is not my movement, but I would love to do whatever I can to be a strong ally for this movement and be in conversation with people across our industry about what it means to take the set of principles. And if you haven't familiarized yourselves with the CCF principles, please go on to the CCF website. And if nothing else, take a look at and think about the 10 principles, and even consider bringing those principles into a staff meeting or a board meeting for discussion. So CCF is here to stay. There is no doubt about it. And we have to be more thoughtful and, quite frankly, more disruptive in terms of how we think about bringing these, what are ultimately incredibly positive principles, into our work. Just think about the emphasis that's placed on generosity and sharing resources and ideas across organizations. We're not in competition with each other. We're all working toward the same end, right? Think about, the principle that everyone who engages with a nonprofit organization is valued, whether they're a volunteer, a big strategic donor, a smaller donor, a member, what have you. I mean, this is good stuff, and to be lifting this up is critically important. So please, if you do one thing in the next, 3 months to expand your thinking about fundraising practices, spend some time on the CCF website. Secondly, I think the way, storytelling is at the center of fundraising work. It is stories that inspire people to support missions, right? So to support programs and to support people. And the shifts that have occurred and are continuing to occur in the way that we do storytelling from a more ethical perspective and an asset-based mindset, where we're talking about people from the perspective of what they can accomplish, what their aspirations and hopes and dreams are, not what their shortcomings and challenges are. These are subtle and incredibly meaningful shifts in the communications field as it relates to nonprofits and fundraising. And the third thing, Jay, that I think is I would say a developing conversation in our sector is really around donor recognition. And how do we think about placing a value on people in terms of how we recognize their support? In large institutions, small institutions, across the sector, naming opportunities have been, a carrot that has been dangled in front of people for decades. And it's been thought that if only we could offer them a place in our new building where their gift of $5 million could be recognized, we can get to yes with this donor. And, Julia, you may want to tell the story you shared with me earlier, but all I'll say is that there are more campaigns than not now that we're working on where either there are no naming opportunities being offered or a different kind of donor recognition that recognizes and values all donors, or even better, the recognition is for people who have been involved in developing and advancing the organization and its impact on the world, not necessarily the people making the biggest gifts. So again, like thinking into 2023, if you have a donor recognition program, policy, set of guidelines, please establish a work group and have a discussion or a series of discussions about how you want to evolve these practices in your organization that will give more people a sense of belonging, value, and inclusion in the life of your organization.
And Julia, I would love to hear this story. And if I may, just before we begin, we have I wanted to thank Deirdre in the chat for giving that link. I'm without a producer, so I'm not typing those links. But for those who didn't see that, you can look up any of the things we're talking about today on Google pretty easily because they have good visibility. Community-centric fundraising is one. And Julia, if you want to tell that story, we'd love to hear it. I also would love it if you wouldn't mind touching on one thing. Earlier, you talked about the importance of kind of tailoring our communication to donors, and in fact, using AI and other tools to do that. So we're actually talking to people, not as ATM machines. Sometimes people have positioned CCF, community-centric fundraising, and donor-centric fundraising as these opposing forces on a battlefield. Can you please, from your perspective, share whether or not that's true, or if there's a way to get these ideas so we're actually treating everybody well?
Yes, no, I think we're mission centered and we're donor attuned, or mission centered and donor, and we're building our relationship with donors. The confusion around donor centered is if you're letting the donors impact your mission or their gift impacts your program idea. And we're shifting from what would you like us to do with your gift to do you agree with our mission? Are you on board with our mission? Here is our plan that our people have put together with their expertise and the input from the communities we're serving. And would you like to join us in making this plan a reality? And so it is about bringing donors into our work. And that is, but the work is community focused. And so I think you can easily do both by still, a donor wants to make a difference. And again, this goes back, I think all donors wish to make a difference. I think if we've had a number of questions about the younger generations. The younger generations want to make a difference, both in their giving and in their action. And so I think their action is coming in and being part of the organization. And we can have them come in and rather tell the organization how to serve their community. They will come in and help the organization serve the community. So that it sounds like it's changed one word in that sentence, but it's a very important word, from telling to helping the organization. And I think that's really important. And I don't think that generation will be motivated by naming gift opportunities as much as previous generations. The first time I went into a campaign, it was for a $20 million campaign with not one naming opportunity. And the donor wall was alphabetical order for anyone who had participated at any level.
May I ask a follow-up on this then, just to dig into this a little bit more? Is the potential issue with naming opportunities that they're not attuned to the needs and interests of the rising generation of donors, or is it that there's something ethically challenging about them inherently?
Well, I mean, I have an opinion about that, which is that I think that as we move into a world that places higher value on equity and inclusion, we have to ask ourselves the question, do the people who make the largest gifts get the most recognition? That's really at the heart of the issue, I think. And what are we conveying to everyone else in our community by doing that, right? So if I am a young family walking into a public space that has been supported in part by donor dollars, and the first thing that I see is a name that is taking up a significant place, and it's the name of the space that I'm going to, I may say, well, am I welcome here? Who is this person? And so I think there's an opportunity in recognition to build better, more awareness and education about the varied roles that people play in activating missions. I just think that if we're building especially spaces that are public spaces, and we want everyone to feel welcomed in our public space, we just have to think about what effect naming opportunities have on giving that sense of welcome. So
that's such a beautiful way of thinking about that. it begs another question, which may be almost impossible to answer, and that's looking at the past and then looking toward the future. We will all walk into buildings where there's a big name on a wall. And to your point, sometimes we don't think much of it. Sometimes it means a lot, and sometimes in very negative ways. How will institutions need to think about what they've done in the past in terms of how fundraising and recognition has been done, so that it both honors people who may have helped, brought us here to the party, but it also recognizes the people who are here now and those who will be with us in the future?
So I think some of the things folks are doing is putting a time amount on the on any naming opportunity that is present, so that there is opportunity for others to become part of that space. Some organizations are looking at recognition opportunities being honoring someone, as Kate said, who's moved the mission forward. It might be through a donation, it might be through their work, it might be through their leadership, it might be through the representation they have in the community. And so naming for what we want that space to be and acknowledge can be very important. I think there are a lot of institutions that are looking back at what they have in their buildings, about whose names are on them. We saw that with the Enron scandal, as we know, and that's part of when some of this recognition actually started. And now I'm glad it started with that, because now as we're thinking about it in this equitable DEIA belonging sense, it's not a foreign concept to people. And this is I think an even more important reason to be thinking about it, again, in my opinion. And so I think people have to go back and look, and at the same time, we don't want to lose, and we always want to honor our donors. I just finished fundraising for a school where we do have a plaque from the early 1900s of all of the donors. And we point to it and say, these are the folks who opened this for us. And now it's our turn to make sure it stays for the next generation. So we're not saying get rid of all recognition. We do think still listing recognition, honoring philanthropy, demonstrating the importance of philanthropy and the work that we're doing, all types of philanthropy, honoring all sorts of different donors in different ways is all really important. So, and someone's mentioning Mackenzie Scott does not want a building, right? Very important. Thank you.
Right. This is a challenging topic, because sometimes we're dealing not just with one person's values or one institution's values, but a whole set of people over time. It's not just a fixed point in time. So it's been so helpful to hear the way you've discussed this for us and shared your thoughts on this and how to contend with as we look forward. This is the ultimate softball question, but I'm always interested, especially it's the end of the year. What are you excited most about as you look forward into the new year? What's keeping you both juiced up for what's ahead?
Julia, have any thoughts?
Well, I am just excited that some of these conversations that have been under the surface are really coming to the forefront of philanthropy. I'm really excited about Mackenzie Scott's giving. I hate to take the softball with what was just put out there. I'm loving the fact that people are asking the question about eliminating major gift officers, or what's the right term for mid-level giving. And I'll just answer that in the moment. We've been talking about strategic giving officers. There's other titles out there, but that's strategic gifts versus major gifts, and essential gifts for those that are giving on an annual basis in ranges that aren't as targeted. And so I'm just excited we're talking about those things. We're thinking about those things. We're trying to make philanthropy more accessible. And if we want to reach that generation that's going to be the beneficiary of this transfer of wealth, we're going to have to answer those questions.
Yeah. And Jay, I'll just say that for me, the thing I'm most excited about in the year ahead is leadership, and watching and supporting the many new leaders that are moving into CEO and ED roles of nonprofit organizations. We are, looking at welcoming and supporting the success of many new leaders of color, women in executive positions, and younger people. And I can't help but think that through their leadership, we are going to make just significant progress toward this change that our sector is uniquely designed to make happen. We are, and it all starts with leadership. So I'm just really excited about the people that are leading institutions now more than ever, and how they are going to change the conversation and take us to a much better place.
And I know we could talk about that for another hour, and I wish we could. And I also want to just add my thanks to everybody out there who's asking these questions, and especially who's been asking them here in the form of questions and in the chat. I hope we've at least touched on the spirit, if not the letter, of what you've been asking about, because these are great questions and comments. We do appreciate you. I want to thank both of you so much, not only for spending this time with us this afternoon and being willing to do some analysis on the spot without preparation for a lot of tough issues, but also looking forward in a way that hopefully makes us all a little bit better prepared for the year ahead. If people want to learn more about the two of you and about the firm and follow you and all that sort of thing, what's the best way that they can do that and get to know you and the firm?
First of all, I would say I know there are a lot of questions that we did not get to, and Julie and I would love to hear from any of you. If you want to even just copy and paste your question and put it in an email to us, I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat our 2 email addresses, and please be in touch with us. We would love to hear from you and keep the conversation going for sure.
And
Kate, with
Here's what's on your mind too.
Oh, yes, they're in there. And with your permission, Kate, I'll also read those, because there is a recording of this being made. And so if that's okay, that way people who are listening or watching this later will know. That's Kate.Roosevelt, spelled like the president, at campbellcompany.com, and Julia McGuire, that's McGuire, at campbellcompany.com. You can tell these are 2 generous folks. And so that was very kind of you to share that. I would also encourage you to go, of course, to the firm's website. The firm is a leader, to speak of leadership again, in addressing these issues, not just in terms of the practice it does for its clients, but in being willing to really lean into issues that are of importance to all of us. And that's, the fact that you have 2 co-presidents right here, both women leading this firm, with this kind of vision is emblematic of that. My thanks to both of you, to Julia, to Kate, for being willing to take time and talk. And hopefully we can somehow corral you to come back and do it again in 23.
Would love to do it. Someone is asking us just to redo the emails in the chat. So
sure.
Kate, Kate.Roosevelt at campbellcompany.com, and Julia.McGuire, McGuire at campbellcompany.com. Kate did put them in the chat as well, and you're welcome to go to our website, campbellcompany.com, and you'll find us both there with our emails as well.
And they both have LinkedIn profiles, so you can find those right there at LinkedIn. And if for any reason you want to reach out to me as we prepare for the next year, you can do that at j@DonorSearch.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, anywhere but Twitter these days. And so just feel free to reach out if you have ideas, thoughts, suggestions, criticisms, whatever it is. Keep it coming this way. We want to make sure we have at least as much content for you focused around what you want to see and hear next year as we did this year. So at a minimum, that's going to mean 1 to 2 programs per week built around the needs of fundraisers and people in philanthropy, and that is you. So please don't see that as an idle offering. Reach out, let us know what you want, and that's what you'll get. And in the meantime, I want to wish all of you a really, really happy, healthy, and hopeful new year. Until then, take care. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.